The incident, December 24th, 2008. While most of America was settling in for a night of warmth and carols, exchanging gifts under twinkling lights and sharing hugs by the fireplace, one family in Covina, California, was about to be pulled into an unimaginable nightmare. At approximately 11:30 p.m., a knock came at the front door of 1129 East Knoll Crest Drive. Inside, the Ortega family was gathered: grandparents, children, grandchildren, in-laws, the kind of chaotic, love-filled scene that makes Christmas magic feel real. An 8-year-old girl, her eyes sparkling with excitement, peeked through the window and saw a man in a Santa Claus suit standing on the porch. "Santa!" she screamed, her voice brimming with innocent joy. She ran to the door, believing she was about to receive a magical visit she would remember forever. But the moment the door opened, reality twisted into something far more sinister. Without hesitation, Santa pulled out a 9mm semi-automatic handgun and shot the little girl in the face. Her scream dissolved into chaos as terror erupted throughout the house. In an instant, what had been a sanctuary of warmth became a slaughterhouse. The shooter moved through the rooms methodically, firing at anyone in sight. This Santa was no mysterious stranger from a holiday story. He was Bruce Jeffrey Pardo, the estranged ex-husband of Sylvia Ortega. Consumed by rage, humiliation, and a thirst for revenge, he came not bearing gifts, but death. That night, 9 members of the Ortega family were murdered. A home that had once echoed with laughter and holiday music was reduced to smoldering ash and unspeakable loss. Timeline of discovery. The Ortega family's Christmas Eve had begun like countless others across the country. Joseph and Alicia Ortega, beloved grandparents married for over half a century, had opened their doors to their children and grandchildren for a traditional holiday feast. Food was shared, games played, music drifted through the halls, a house alive with decades of love and memories. Around 11:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. Witnesses described how Pardo, in his Santa suit, entered holding a large, wrapped gift that no one suspected was anything but festive. Within seconds, the facade shattered. He drew multiple handguns and began shooting guests at close range, moving with deliberate precision. Amidst the chaos, he unwrapped his gift, revealing a homemade flamethrower constructed from a pressurized fuel tank. After shooting his victims, he began spraying racing fuel throughout the house, igniting a hellish blaze that roared up nearly 50 feet into the night sky. The flames were so intense that Pardo's Santa suit began to melt onto his own skin, fusing with his flesh in a grotesque testament to his monstrous act. When first responders arrived, they found a scene that defied imagination. Fire engulfed the home, the air choked with smoke and the stench of burning wood, and worse, bodies lay scattered, the structure collapsing around them. It took more than 80 firefighters over an hour to control the blaze, and in the days that followed, victims could only be identified through dental records and surgical implants. The family had been gathered in love and warmth, never imagining the visitor at their door would turn a night of joy into a night of terror. The victims and their life. Joseph Ortega, 80, and his wife Alicia, 70, were pillars of their community, admired for their devotion to family and faith. They had raised 5 children: Sylvia, James, Charles, Alicia Jr., and Letitia. Christmas Eve was a sacred tradition, a night to celebrate togetherness and to pass on their family's warmth to a new generation. Sylvia Ortega, at 43, was the intended target, Bruce Pardo's ex-wife. Their divorce had been messy and bitter, but no one could have imagined it would end in this. James and Charles, Sylvia's brothers, both tried to shield their family members, selflessly stepping into the line of fire to protect the ones they loved. Michael Ortiz, Sylvia's 17-year-old nephew, was upstairs at his computer when the attack began. He was found later, believed to have died from smoke inhalation rather than gunfire. A small detail that underlines just how quickly lives were stolen, even from those not in the immediate line of fire. Letitia and her daughter Katrina, the young girl who opened the door to Santa, were among the few who survived. Katrina, despite being shot in the face, clung to life. Letitia, in a moment of raw terror and unimaginable courage, hid under a table and called 911, her voice shaking as she whispered updates. "He's shooting. My daughter's been shot in the face. Like, please, hurry." Letitia would become a living testament to resilience. Her daughter, Katrina, carried not only physical scars, but also the weight of survival. Through the years, they refused to let that night define them, choosing to honor their family's spirit rather than the horror that sought to extinguish it. Crime scene breakdown. When law enforcement finally breached the property, they stepped into a world they would never forget. The home was no longer a home. It was a charred mausoleum of what once had been a sanctuary. Flames had reduced walls to skeletal frames. Furniture was scorched beyond recognition. The air was thick with the acrid stench of burnt wood, melted plastic, and human remains. Victims were discovered huddled in corners, under tables, or clinging to each other, as though even in their final moments they sought comfort in one another's arms. The 911 call from Letitia, still echoing through dispatch recordings, guided officers into the burning ruins. Amid the debris, firefighters and investigators uncovered 8 bodies at first. Michael Ortiz's remains were later found upstairs, likely overtaken by smoke and flames. Because of the severity of the burns, most identifications required dental records and surgical implants, a cruel necessity that drove home the violence's enormity. Outside, stunned neighbors stood in their pajamas, staring helplessly as the inferno devoured what had been a house full of love just hours earlier. Emergency lights painted the street in cold, harsh colors. A blue sedan was seen fleeing, Pardo's escape vehicle, slipping into the darkness even as the neighborhood remained paralyzed in horror. Inside, officers found 4 legally purchased handguns, high-capacity magazines, and remnants of the flamethrower that turned an already monstrous act into something almost otherworldly in its cruelty. Suspicion and lies. As investigators pieced together the puzzle, a chilling portrait of Bruce Pardo emerged. The Santa suit wasn't a spur-of-the-moment disguise. It was custom-ordered months in advance under the innocent pretense of a party costume. In reality, it was the final layer of a meticulously constructed plan he had begun assembling in June 2008, 6 months before the attack. His purchases were coldly deliberate. 5 9mm handguns sourced from various stores to avoid suspicion, a homemade flamethrower rigged together from industrial piping and gasoline tanks, and high-capacity magazines smuggled in to ensure he wouldn't need to reload under pressure. Pardo also wore a girdle beneath the suit, strapped with over $17,000 in cash, his planned escape fund. On his costume, he rigged explosives designed to detonate if anyone tampered with it posthumously. The motive? Sylvia's divorce had torn open secrets Bruce never wanted revealed. She demanded spousal support, alleging he had hidden wealth and lied to her about a disabled son from a previous relationship, a child he refused to acknowledge or support financially. When she discovered the truth and took legal action, Bruce's life began to spiral. Fired from his job at the prestigious Jet Propulsion Laboratory for false billing practices, he blamed Sylvia and her family for his ruin. On Christmas Eve, Bruce chose to reclaim control in the most violent way imaginable. Dressed as the season's symbol of joy, he brought terror that would ripple across the community and leave an indelible scar on the holiday forever. The turning point. Bruce Pardo believed he had orchestrated the perfect escape. After setting the house ablaze, he fled in a rental Dodge Caliber toward his brother's home in Sylmar, some 40 miles away. But as the flames devoured his crime scene, they had also turned on him. The synthetic Santa suit fused to his skin, causing excruciating third-degree burns on his arms and hands. Once he arrived at his brother's home, his injuries rendered him incapable of following through with his getaway. Hours later, his brother returned from a party to a chilling sight. Bruce, lifeless on the couch, a gunshot wound through his mouth, 2 handguns lying at his side. The once pristine Santa suit was melted and charred, pieces still clinging to his burned flesh. Investigators later found his Dodge rigged with a booby trap, set to explode if moved. At his Montrose home, police discovered a veritable arsenal. Additional explosive devices, high-octane fuel containers, and materials indicating he had planned for an even broader rampage. Pardo hadn't simply snapped. Every move, every purchase, every bolt in the flamethrower was the product of months of meticulous hatred. His final act, suicide, wasn't an act of cowardice, but one last attempt to control his narrative, to avoid capture, to escape judgment by any hands but his own. Act 7. Psychology and motive. From the outside, Bruce Pardo appeared to be the embodiment of holiday cheer, a friendly face in church, a smiling party guest, a man people thought they knew. But beneath the carefully polished veneer festered a darkness that few could comprehend. As his life unraveled, Pardo retreated into a world of grievances and fantasies of revenge, losing his high-paying engineering position and facing a humiliating divorce, stripped away the layers he had constructed for the world to see. He refused to pay spousal support, raged at losing the house, and was tormented by Sylvia's discovery of his hidden disabled son, a child he had abandoned completely. FBI profilers would later describe him as a textbook malignant narcissist. Bruce viewed the world through a singular, distorted lens. He was always the victim, and everyone else was to blame for his failures. When faced with accountability, he chose annihilation over humility. The Santa suit itself was a final stroke of his twisted theater, a grotesque inversion of a figure meant to represent joy, warmth, and generosity. Psychologists speculated that he believed Sylvia and her family had no right to celebrate, no right to joy that he could no longer share or control, so he took it from them permanently. And in a detail as haunting as it is telling, when he shot himself on that couch, Bruce Pardo still wore his wedding ring. Even in death, he clung to the fantasy that the bond he had destroyed was somehow still his to claim. Act 8. Aftermath and emotional echo. In the years following the massacre, Covina struggled to reclaim the warmth of Christmas. Families decorated their homes with a heaviness they couldn't quite name. Candlelight vigils replaced laughter on that street corner. The burned shell of the Ortega home stood for a time as a dark monument to the unimaginable loss that had occurred within its walls. Letitia, who had survived that night while shielding her wounded daughter, became an emblem of strength. Katrina, who had run towards Santa, full of innocent delight only to be met with gunfire, grew into a young woman defined not by scars, but by resolve. She chose activism over silence. In her teenage years, during a student walkout following the Parkland shooting, she stood before her classmates and read aloud the names of those lost, her voice unwavering. "I know what gun violence feels like," she declared, her words cutting through the silence like a bell. "It tried to silence me once. It never will again." Letitia refused to let Pardo's actions define her family. She gathered the surviving children, rebuilt shattered traditions, and visited the cemetery every Christmas Eve. There, they lit candles, shared stories, and celebrated the lives taken too soon, remembering them for who they were, not how they died. Joseph and Alicia Ortega, their children and grandchildren, left behind a legacy of love and warmth so deep that not even fire could erase it. And Bruce Pardo? He left behind nothing but ash, silence, and a horrifying cautionary tale. No legacy, no warmth, only the bitter reminder that sometimes the most monstrous evils wear the friendliest masks and come bearing gifts. This was not just a Christmas massacre, it was a brutal testament to the fact that monsters don't hide under beds or in dark alleys. They knock on your door, dressed in red and white, smiling. What makes a man burn down a family on the holiest night of the year? Perhaps we'll never fully understand, but one thing remains certain. Vigilance and love must stand stronger than hatred and vengeance. Tell us, what do you think pushes someone past the brink? Let us know in the comments below. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember, true evil rarely announces itself before stepping into your home.